Welcome to Ultra Life Today. I am here with Adam Payne, CEO of Ultra Botanica. I'm here with Ed Fletcher, who we have come to know as a friend that
Yeah.
understands all things herbs and shares some really incredible information with us right from the wild. We love it. I'm Josh Bellew, Chief Product Evangelist for Ultra Botanica. Welcome to Ultra Life Today. And Ed, it's so great seeing you again.
Hey, good morning, Josh and Adam. Glad to see both of you also. Glad to be here.
Ed, where are you? I mean, I'm looking back at this like surrealistic
Yeah.
kind of elven scenery behind you there. What are
I'm
we
in
looking
the
into?
I'm in the high country of North Carolina in the Appalachian Mountains, but it's an undisclosed location because we're talking about American ginseng.
Oh my
How's
gosh.
that? And I'll be showing you some plants, so it's going to remain undisclosed,
Oh
okay?
wow. So the topic today is American ginseng, and we've been talking with Ed Fletcher with Native Botanicals. This is a company you started how long ago? It's been more than a decade, right? Because you actually were in farming or in
Yes.
another related area for a long time, right?
Yes. And I work for several companies. I started in the business as a cultivation manager for a company because at that time, this was back in the early 90s, they actually understood that a lot of our wildcrafted items, such as American ginseng, was getting a lot of pressure on the wild. So they hired me to start a cultivation department. And I worked for a few companies after that. And then I realized, you know, I like to be my own boss. So anyway, I started this company in 2003, I believe, and I worked part time in this as well as working with other companies. And now I'm doing full time in Native Botanical.
That's amazing. And you this job takes you all over the world, and you're sourcing. Have you ever counted how many botanicals that your company touches at this point?
I mean, at one time, our product line handled over 268 different botanicals. I've narrowed
Oh
it
my
down a little
gosh!
bit. That's just too
Wow.
much to handle. Tried to focus a little bit. Yeah, at one time though, we were dealing over 268 different species.
So in homework, we're going to be talking about American ginseng,
Yes.
and this is a material that's been in traditional Chinese medicine and I guess traditional Korean medicine. Most Asian countries, I would say, have ginseng as part of its core medicinal pharmacopoeia,
True.
and it has a long history of a variety of different applications. And I did there was some amazing podcasts on Korean ginseng and the
Hmm.
difficulties that and the people that have dedicated their lives to what they called near natural harvesting of ginseng, which is where they actually plant the seeds into the wild and then they go back to those places and then harvest it. What's its traditional application? I've heard it's been in kind of virility, male enhancement, energy, medicine. Where have you seen its biggest applications?
Yeah, generally speaking, that's where it's been in male enhancement, and they call it uh, the love, the love root, I think it is, and things like that. That's been the general overall. Although it's considered an adaptogen, also. In other words, you know what an adaptogen is? It goes into your system, and whatever needs the most help supports that.
Sure,
Uh, but then, of course, now it's the same genus but a different species. The Chinese and the Korean is Panax ginseng. The
sure.
ginseng that is here in the U.S. is Panax quinquefolius. So same genus, different species, but they have very similar uses. As a matter of fact, the Chinese, like you say, they've used it for years and years, but they just harvested so much from the wild, they extirpated it there. And so that's when they started looking for other sources. And that's where they ended up in the 1783, I think, is the first recorded record of trade from American ginseng into China, which actually, if you some of the history books say that it was probably the catalyst to the market between the U.S. and China, whether good or bad that may be. They say that that's the one that was started it. So
Oh, interesting.
yeah,
So was it discovered by Chinese immigrants? Do we know anything of kind of like the history of how it was discovered?
yes, it was it was discovered in Virginia by a botanist. I can't remember his name. right off the top of my head, but it was around 1783. He noticed the species out in the wild, and it was not a botanist. It was just a woodsman, a gentleman who lived there. It was later Linnaeus is the botanist who actually classified. He's a famous botanist who, taxonomically keyed it out and classified it as also a panax and gave it the species name Quincifolius. But yeah, in Virginia, sometime after 1783, they used to harvest it, and they found out they called it the love. They actually the American found that, but he went back and looked at the Iroquois Indians and
Yeah.
also the Cherokee Indians, and they had already had it in their medicina, and you've been using it, and they were the ones that also labeled it the
Oh,
love tree.
really? So there
Yeah,
must be there must, I mean, if we have all of these diverse cultures that
yeah,
have
used
found
it for
its
the same
potent
thing.
same thing, there must be a clue there. And
Exactly. You don't need a double-blind placebo study, I think, when you have different tribes and different continents finding out the same results, huh?
that's interesting.
So
So
is growing ginseng just for the kind of casual hobby gardener person, Ed? Who ends up actually growing ginseng, and how long is the cycle from the time they plant to when they're able to utilize and sell the root?
Okay, first of all, let me differentiate. There's two completely different markets of ginseng. All of the ginseng that is on the shelf in the bottles is cultivated ginseng
hmm,
because that cost, I mean, from the grower to the manufacturer, it's in the in the low 20s or early $30 a pound. So you put it in the bottle, you can afford it. Wild American ginseng, the last 2 years, goes between $600 and $800 a pound. So
what?
Wow.
if we put that in a bottle, nobody's going to pay $3,000 for a bottle, right?
No.
So anyway, that let me straighten that out. There's two completely different markets. The wild ginseng,
Okay.
and 99% of the wild ginseng goes to China
Hmm.
because China reveres it and they revere it more, and their traditional use is much more. The cultivated ginseng, which is cultivated mostly as far as in intense cultivation under shade cloth in Wisconsin and Canada, that takes 3 to 4 years to grow it from seed and they harvest. In the wild ginseng, Adam, like you were talking about, you were saying the natural ginseng here in the US, they call it wild simulated
Yeah,
ginseng,
wild, yeah, okay.
where you would go and put a seed in the ground, and you wouldn't fertilize it, you wouldn't irrigate it, you wouldn't manipulate it anyway. You'd let it grow because then it would have the natural characteristics of a wild, closest to wild.
Yeah.
That takes 8 to 12 years.
8 to 12 years in its natural environment.
Wow.
And I've also heard that, it's only a small percentage of the simulated ginseng, the natural simulated ginseng, actually is harvestable because animals like to dig up the root and eat it, and
True,
then it's a lot of natural pests that can come in
true.
and eat and damage the roots. And I've also heard that if you harvest it, you have a very short period of time from when you actually harvest it to when you need to get it into some sort of preservation media before it starts to spoil. Is that true?
Well, if you're going to do an extract, a fresh root extract, yes. But I would say 90% of what's in the market, it goes to a dried root. And the growers that I work with, when we harvest the cultivated, that day we're already set up. We wash it and then we dry it. It goes straight from the washer into the dryer that day. So you stabilize it by dehydrating.
That's interesting. Yeah, we traditionally will see these kind of the classic pictures of these immense roots with
Yeah,
with all of the different patterns on them. It looks like it's stuck in a
right.
container, a glass container with ethanol in them. Are
True.
those the wild crafted roots that are
Yes.
really expensive that we're seeing pictures of?
Yes, and I've heard of that all through my life too. And I actually experienced it about, I'd say 5 years ago here in North Carolina. We hosted the North American Ginseng Conference,
Oh,
and of
wow.
course we had some Chinese attendees here and wanted to. And I actually brought in a wildcraft gentleman who had some nice roots, and he brought them in to show. And after the event, he was approached by a Chinese lady, and she said, "How much would you sell me that root for?" So we negotiated with the root, and finally we sold her one root for $1,000.
Oh, wow.
my question was, that's valuable. After we made the transaction, I said, "Do you mind asking what you're going to do with it?" And she said, "I'm going to put it in instead of a bottle, she was going to mount it, and she had some others mounted in a frame under glass, and she was going to take it back to China and give it to her grandfather as a gift."
Oh, wow. So I
Which is
guess it's
awesome.
revered for its potency and its just its beauty at the same time.
Yes,
Also, it's sort of a symbol of everything
yes,
in there.
it is.
Now, let's get into the medicinal qualities a little bit.
Okay,
There's a class of compounds in there called ginsenosides that are
correct.
very similar to what we find in ginger. Is that correct? Is this the
I
same
don't know that
family?
you know more about the in ginger, but it is ginsenosides. Most of my customers have an active or marker constituent level of ginsenosides they're looking for. That's in the cultivated. The
Hmm.
wild doesn't matter. The Chinese buy it strictly on aesthetics, how it looks. The
And
wild,
do they care about? I mean, do the Chinese care about beyond its aesthetics,
no.
its potency? Are they going to use it for its potency, or is it just really? It's just this is the thing I'm going to mount on the shelf as kind of
No,
a
they
gift.
no, they use it. No,
They use it.
most
Okay.
yeah, most of the wildcrafted roots, that are in that 8 to 20 year age range. But the roots that you're talking about, and I'm talking about the really big ones that sold for $1,000 and it's going to be mounted and donated or given as a gift, those were probably 30 or 40 years old. I
Oh
mean, there have
wow.
been ginseng roots that have been dug that have been 45 to 60 years old, and those are the really big ones that, when those are found, they don't dare put them in the pile with the other ones that are just going to sell in the open market over there. But no, the Chinese, and when they get it over there, I've heard that they grade it in, they have 26 different grades of aesthetics that they grade it out as. So they're really,
20, 26 different aesthetics.
mhm,
Incredible.
yes,
So,
it is.
Ed, is there a legal harvesting season and an
Yes.
illegal harvesting season? How does that work with ginseng?
Yes, ginseng was one of the first, I won't say the first, but it was one of the very first American medicinal plants to go on CITES, which is the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, which is international. And that means that it's obviously been considered threatened and endangered. I'm sorry, I don't remember the year. I think it was in maybe the late 70s. It went on that list. And when it went on that list, the country where the plant that goes on CITES, they're charged, whoever their authority is. In the United States, it's the U.S. Fish and Wildlife.
Oh,
They are
interesting.
charged with protecting that species. So when they
Wow.
did that, they immediately started protecting it. They started cutting back on the permits that they give in, government-owned land, national forest or state forest, how much you could harvest. And then I don't remember the year, but as of now, there is both a season and a size, just like sort of on a fish. The ginseng season, there's 19 states in the United States in the eastern U.S. where ginseng can be legally harvested this year, and they look at that every year and say if you can or you can't. There's 19 states and they have a season, so they vary a little depending on the region because they're up and down the eastern coast and the Appalachian Mountains. But generally speaking, they open up either August 15th or September 1st, and then they go till the end of the year. But into December, the plant is herbaceous perennial; it dies back, so that's the end of its natural season. And as far as the size goes, I think they put a size on it in sometime in the late 90s, maybe the early 2000s. They said you cannot ship or harvest anything less than 5 years old. And 5 years old, the reason for the 5 year old rule is that's generally speaking in the wild when the plant has a chance to mature, bear seeds, and drop seeds. Like all species, us included, we're here on this earth to spread our seeds and spread our
Wow.
species. So they've given it, which I respect that very much because, my opinion, we need to give the plant that natural ability and natural opportunity to share. And there's also rules and regulations in each state on if you can take the seeds out of the wild and plant them, back at your house, or if they have to be planted in the immediate vicinity.
No,
We've done a lot of
that's
work with that.
interesting.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Our mission is to take nature's most beloved botanicals and enhance them with our liquid protein scaffold technology. This helps it reach your cells faster and better. With exponentially enhanced bioavailability, you'll feel better every day. Ultra Botanica, the feel-good curcumin. So what does a wild ginseng plant look like, Ed?
Aha. Are you ready to take a walk?
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice.
We're a little bit early for the big ripe red berries to be showing, but I can show you mature plants with seed pods on them. So here we go.
Okay.
Let's see here. So right here, there's a shot of an American ginseng plant from above.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, this is what they call a four prong. As you can see, it's about knee high, knee high. Tell me if you can't see good, but
Oh, we can see it. Yeah.
okay, but it's about knee high. It comes up and then it sprouts out. Generally, sprouts out as a smaller. Let's see. Here's what they call a three prong. There's a lot of three prong, but this is a four prong, and this is after it blooms here. This is a seed pod as they begin to mature, and when these seed pod is mature, it'll be bright red, and each capsule on there will probably contain 3 to 5 seeds in it.
It's beautiful. So how do you know how old the plant is, Ed?
The real way to know that it's 5 years old is after you dig the root. Each year where the stem comes up, because it's herbaceous perennial, each year where the stem comes up and then it dies back, it leaves a stem scar on the root.
Oh, it's like a tree. So it has like a growth ring to it.
Exactly. It's just a stem scar on the root. So when you dig it up, it's got to have at least 5 stem scars. But this is a funny story. After the Fish and Wildlife made the rule that it had to be 5 years old, they called us up, the company I was working at the time, because we dealt in wild ginseng. They said, "Hey, can we come up and you teach us how to tell if it's 5 years old?"
Oh my gosh.
I mean, they made the rule, but they didn't know how to enforce it. So they came up and we showed them how to grade it out. But then we said, well, we don't want people to go out and dig the root.
And then kill it essentially, right? And then put
it. So generally speaking, if it's a three prong, when it gets to the stage to be a three prong and it's blooming, then that's most likely it's at least 5 years old.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So you got at least a 5-year-old plant there in an undisclosed location. So is that wild simulated there, or is that actually a wild?
No, this is wild simulated. Yeah, this is wild simulated.
It's beautiful.
Thank you. It's it does real well here.
So
as long as the turkeys, you were talking about animals, the turkeys do get into the seeds, and they oftentimes will dig up, and they love the top of the bud. You know, after every season it grows, it puts on a bud for the following year to grow, and the turkeys love that nice tender bud. They'll scrape the soil and eat that bud. So you need to keep the turkey. Other than that, deer sometimes will eat the tops off, but ginseng's very resilient. Even if they eat the tops off, it will tend to come back the next year. So
interesting.
So what
ahead,
portion
Josh.
of the plants are used? Is it strictly the root that is the highly valued portion, or do they use the other portions as well?
Good question. So the root is the main portion. I'd say 90% of the market is in root, but the herb is also used. And, you know, for sustainability issues, we've tried to encourage some customers to, you know, look at the ginsenoside content in the herb. And it does have the ginsenoside content there. It's just not in the levels that the root has it. So I tell you, in the tea market is where they're using a lot of the ginseng leaf in the teas, but mainly
interesting.
It's still the root.
Yeah, that would be a pretty easy use there. Especially if you're getting, I would imagine the ginsenosides are actually produced in the leaf and then are stored in the root for next season. I would imagine that people that are into wild crafted or wild harvested ginseng kind of have their secret spots allocated throughout the mountain ranges where they travel. Are those kind of like family held secrets? I'm just trying to imagine these little enclaves of people that know where their secret stashes of wild ginseng are.
Yes. The Appalachian, not to call them the hillbillies of the mountain. I mean, it's passed down through generations. The grandfather passed it down to the son and the grandson. They have their own particular, they call them honey holes.
Honey holes.
Or areas. Yeah, and you do not share that outside of your family or your close relatives that you want to. But it's I knew a lady who would put her son through college. Adam actually did. Previous company I worked at, she would go out and dig her wild simulated ginseng, and she would dig just enough and come in and say, "Okay." She'd sell it, and she'd look at the check and say, "Okay, I've got enough now to pay my son's tuition." And
Oh my gosh.
likewise, in the past, I
I
mean,
mean,
it started out.
really? Was she making? I mean, like five, six,
Yes.
$8,000 a season?
This was back in the '90s, so I think he was in state tuition. I think she was paying around 3,000 or 3,200 a semester, but she put his way through college. In the
Wow.
early on, it was traded for saddles. In the 1700s, there's records of it being traded for honey, saddles, a bottle of rum, and then yeah. But it's been it's always been used as a trade and things. So yeah, sure has.
Interesting. Let's get into the actual. What should people be? Is there? We talked about different medicinals in the past, like golden seal, right?
Hmm.
And it's
Hmm.
and how much of it there's forgeries of it, really smart forgeries. Do people need to be concerned at all about ginseng and kind of people falsifying what it is in the
No,
marketplace?
no, ginseng is one of those that no, just because number one, the wild is so high and it's bought on aesthetics. They leave it whole. They leave it whole, obviously, to look at aesthetically and buy it, and the price is so high. Uh, and as far as cultivated, the species of Panax quinquefolius, it's highly cultivated, highly marketed. So, in my opinion, the only in the last, I'd say the last 8 years, is when people started doing the wild simulated. Adam, they would take the seed out and put them in the wild,
Right.
and they would bring them in to the buyers, the dealers, and the dealer might, if the dealers are very discerning and been experienced in it, he might look at it and say, "Well, this looks like you might have planted the seed. It just didn't have all of the characteristics of a wild compared." And he might say, "Well, this is wild simulated. I'm not going to pay you the same price I would for wild," which we in the industry, I mean, we disagree with that. If it looks wild enough and it's going to be sold in the Chinese market as wild, then it should be paid the wild price. And that's what's going to support wild simulated. And in my opinion, will help keep it around because, I mean, just in our area, I mean, anywhere in the mountains, we're building more houses, building more roads. You're destroying lots of ginseng every year. So
Sure.
I think proper manipulation by man, in other words, by planting the seed back and protecting certain areas and managing your wild crops and planting wild simulated, that's going to be one of the best ways to keep wild ginseng available.
So, I mean, I can't imagine how they would actually be able to differentiate wild simulated from actual wild. It's
It's
grown in
difficult.
soil, it's just
Yeah.
planted, and it's just
True.
instead of seed naturally falling to the ground and somehow, rolling into a place where it can start to grow and flourish, you have somebody that's taking the seed and planting it. How can you,
Yeah.
I, can you differentiate that? Except if, like, you're just under oath and saying, yeah, I planted that seed,
Yeah.
or no, I just found it in the wild, right?
I
There
mean,
can't be a difference.
yeah, like I said, a discerning, they're, well, they're very fine differences, and you really have to be an experienced dealer or ginseng buyer. And anybody that buys
Right.
ginseng has to be a registered ginseng buyer with the state and the government and every pound of ginseng they buy, they have to record it, and that's under CITES rules. They have to document where it came from, the quantity they bought, who they bought it from,
Okay.
make sure the
That
person bought
makes
it
sense.
legally. Yeah, and they have to trace it back. So that's how the U.S. Fish and Wildlife every year makes their judgment. Their charge is to make an annual judgment that what was harvested from that state was not detrimental to the wild crop. If they agree with that every year, then they say, okay, you can harvest the next year. Some years, a few years ago, I think Kentucky or one of the states, they decided there was too much harvested, and they said no more harvesting this year of wild ginseng in this state. So they're doing
Wow.
their job the best they can, and it's based on that information. Yeah,
That's interesting. Well,
Is it
Ed,
yeah.
is it accurate that about 90% of the ginseng grown in the United States actually leaves our borders, Ed?
Well, 99% of the wild does. Of the cultivated ginseng, I don't know those numbers. A lot does go to China because they still make a finished product, but a lot of it is, processed in China and comes back just because of the dollar. But no, there's a lot of the processing and manufacturing and final retail of cultivated ginseng is done in the U.S., but I don't know the percentages.
We finally have something that we can ship to China in abundance.
Well,
Oh
not
yeah,
that much
and they've been
abundance,
doing
right?
it for years. You're exactly right. Yeah.
Wow.
Interesting. So, Ed, are there any brands of ginseng out there that you really that you know are doing a good job with packaging the product or getting it into the hands of people?
Quite frankly, I think it's so because it's cultivated, it's so harmonized because it's just been done for so many years that it's all pretty standard across the board as far as the getting the raw material to the manufacturer. Of course, as I always say, I think the companies who've been around the longest and have the well-known names, it's up to their reputation, in my opinion, to do a good job and test the ginsenicides and make sure it's a good product in the bottle. Uh, those are the ones I lean more towards. And again, I think I said this last time, you know, go to your box stores, your big box stores, and buy your underwear, your socks.
Right.
Go to your really good health food stores and be willing to pay money when you're buying something to put in your body for your health. That's my general rule.
Josh, we were at a naturopath's kind of boutique store out in Bentonville, Arkansas, 2 weeks ago. What was the name of the brand that they had on the shelf that was really looked like it was really high quality? Do you remember what it was
Oh,
called?
I cannot think about that right now. I can't pull it up, Adam.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's some really, I think you're right, Ed. You go into some of these
It,
naturopaths
it
that
may have been standard process,
it was
actually.
standard process.
Yeah, there
Yeah,
we go.
Yeah.
Yeah,
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 and obviously they're in Wisconsin, so they're going to get it
right.
as fresh from the source as possible. Yeah, I agree.
Yep.
yeah.
Ginseng
Yeah,
capital of the United States, right?
yes, you're right.
And
It
we
is.
should. I would love to get some of the people from Standard Process on to talk about what they do.
Yeah,
I have so much appreciation for the people that are like you, Ed, that are standing up for
thank you.
making sure that people that are consumers of these botanical medicinal herbs and plants are able to access the highest quality, highest potency, the real thing, and not something that's fake. There's so many unscrupulous operators out there that
True.
are trying to just make money and don't really care about delivering the actual ingredient to people. Any thoughts on any final thoughts on ginseng? Who, if I'm, is it just for enhancing male energy, or is it kind of an erectile dysfunction issue that people go to the ginseng for, or is it other things besides that? Ed, do you know?
I mean, that's what it's most known for.
Yeah,
Yes, I know Chinese medicine has a lot of different, and again, it's considered an adaptation. But a funny story, like you said, I travel around the world to go to these countries, and I go there to look at, specific medicinal from that region or that country. And oftentimes I'll show up in a country and whatever it is, and they'll go, "Oh, we have American ginseng. I mean, we have Nicaraguan ginseng, or we have Venezuelan ginseng." Wherever you go, they have a plant of their native species that they consider equivalent to ginseng, which is they're pointing towards erectile dysfunction or sexual function. So
it's
it's
such
funny.
an important thing, I guess, for men are very concerned about this,
Yeah,
and before we had Viagra and other things, there weren't that many options for people.
no, it's
Um,
true.
yeah,
True.
yeah, and there's some
You're
crazy stories about all of that. Well, it's been great having you, Ed.
Thank you.
This is Ultralife Today. I'm Adam Payne. We've had Ed Fletcher with us today from
An
Native
undisclosed location.
Botanicals. Ed, if people want to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
The best way is probably through our website, nativebotanicalsinc.com.
That's
It's
great.
probably the best way. Or my email is just my name, my initial Fletcher at nativebotanicalsinc.com.
Well, I'm Adam Payne. Josh Bellew here, our chief product evangelist, has been with us remotely, and Ed Fletcher. We've been talking about American ginseng and it's
Yes.
why it's so crazy expensive, how it's been harvested, wildcrafted, and most of it exported to China and to Asian countries. It's been great having you, Ed. Thanks so much. Any ideas for a next topic? We kind of came up with American ginseng last time when we were talking about black cohosh.
Yeah, we did black cohosh and golden seal. Those are some of the more prominent ones from the U.S. Let me think about it a little bit, Adam. We'll think about it, okay?
We'll think about it. Sounds good. Ed, thanks for joining us. This has been
You bet.
Ultra Life Today.